Why do you think that we have seen such a tremendous increase in stacking silver and gold?
I think it's fear of the future. If you have a chunk of money you want to put in a safe place, that's where you put it in gold. Something that you don't think you'll ever have to spend, you want to have it in case you have an emergency. Silver is more a barter currency. It is more every day becoming a barter currency.
Buy your precious metals online from SD Bullion. New customers get gold and silver at spot by visiting sdbullion.com/new.
When I was in college, I really wanted to race sports cars. So, um, when other kids, and this is, I graduated in '68, the summer of love. And one of them, um, when kids were spending their money on, dime bags of marijuana, uh, hey, it only costs $20. I said, no, I'm saving my money. And, I didn't know anybody else except for one or two people who were interested in auto racing. Um, but I wasn't about to waste my money on anything else. And so I worked every day I was in college, at either working in the cafeteria. I worked for the Providence Journal Bulletin.
Mhm.
I worked construction in the summer times. And then when I got out of college, I ended up going in the Army like everybody else. I had a low draft number. And at the last day of school, you're supposed to go to the post office to your mailbox, supposed to open it up, make sure there's no mail left in it, then sign the card and turn the card in. So I go to my mailbox and, um, this is like the end of May, and I open it up and there's a draft notice or some sort of a notice from the local draft board. And I put it back in, locked it, and turned the card in. And I enrolled in the MBA program at the Whittemore School, which is attached to the University of New Hampshire. My father was one of the founding professors of that school. He worked 30 years in New York City. He worked for the Shell Oil Company. He was a very important guy in that machine. Used to ride the New Haven Railroad into New York City every day from Connecticut. Um, so I guess I learned my um, work ethic from him. He was a very hard worker.
Mm.
He was a perfectionist. I kind of became a perfectionist, but we had different interests. When he was in college, he played professional basketball, um, and he saved every penny he made from playing professional basketball, which wasn't a lot, but it let him invest in stock market. And of course, he graduated in 1929, and all his investments, like everybody else's, went south. He invested in new technologies. He was a very smart investor when it came to new technologies. He had invested in television, movie theaters. Keep in mind the 20s were silent films. So he invested in movie theaters and this new thing called a television, which I don't think they'd even named it yet. And still lost all his money. That's what the 1929 crash was like. The stock of every company went to zero. And that shouldn't mean that the company would disappear from the face of the earth, but they did. But he learned then the same thing that Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett is quite a bit younger than my father. My father passed away years ago, but he used to tell me, and I started investing when I was probably 7 or 8, and he would always say the same thing: remember, you're not buying a stock; you're buying a company. You're buying ownership in a company. So don't buy anything but the best company you can buy, you can afford, whose stock you can afford. And I did that from the beginning, um, until I needed money to do something else, like maybe buy tires for my race car.
You also liked hockey too, didn't you?
Yeah, I played hockey. I had a very good friend who was related to the National Hockey League, and his family were very important to the NHL. And I learned how to skate really late. I used to go with them down to Madison Square Garden and skate on the ice, but um, I would skate on my ankles when everybody else was skating on their blades. So it took me a while to get that straightened out, but because of that association with a good friend of mine, I took a liking to hockey and got to be fairly good. Not good enough to play full time in college, but a fair amount. And you know what? I was in a pretty difficult college. I went to Brown University, and it was very clear after a couple of years of being on sports teams that if I didn't stop what I was doing and study, that I was probably going to flunk out.
What was your major?
Well, I wanted to major in international relations because we had in that department we had some excellent professors. When it came down to having enough credits, there really weren't enough credits available in international relations, so I ended up graduating in political science. But some of the what I learned in political science and international relations was fascinating. I didn't know how big the world was and how different everybody was in the world. It still amazes me that because I've been to Italy, I've been to Austria, I've been to Switzerland, been to Germany and France, been blah blah blah, and it still amazes me to this day that you cross a line that's not far from the last line you crossed, and you're in a different world with a different language
Different
entirely.
culture. Yeah.
Different culture.
You had 4 children,
Yes.
Son and 3 daughters.
In 5 years.
In 5 years, you're a busy man. And you built a successful career, too, at IBM.
Yes.
And then you faced tragedy. You lost your wife suddenly.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about her.
Well, she was, when I met her, she was like the happiest person I ever met. And she rarely got discouraged. Yeah, she was very tolerant and had lots and lots of friends. But she had a heart that back in those days, well, when I was growing up, I remember a top athlete. I guess he was a famous baseball player from my town who died from what they called enlarged athlete's heart. And I didn't know what that meant. And it wasn't until my wife died of the same thing that I found out what it meant. There's a tricuspid valve. I think it's the aortic valve. It's a 3-part valve. And if it's not unusual for one part of the valve to not develop properly. So in the process, as your heart is beating, if you're at rest, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference. But if you're running or playing a sport or something, you're regurgitating blood constantly. So your heart has to work harder constantly. And, it's not like my irregular heartbeat, which affected one part of the heart. It affects your whole heart muscle. The heart muscle has to work that much harder. And my wife was a great athlete. And of course, we started having kids to her. It was a team. Okay, so let's try every sport. Let's say, what are we doing today? We're doing volleyball or baseball, or are we going to go skating or whatever? And she was that kind of a mother, and she loves staying home. She had a great job with IBM. That's where I met her, and one of the best systems engineers that I'd met. But she was also, a professional mother. She loved being a mother, and it wasn't unusual. And I'd go home in the afternoon, and there'd be 3 or 4 kids I'd never seen before at our house because nearby families or friends would drop their kids off and go shopping or something because they didn't want to take their kids to the food market because it was a good, safe place to drop the kids off. And more often than not, they'd be a softball game or something going on in the backyard. So yeah, it was kind of a shock when she passed away, and I knew immediately I would have to change my lifestyle because my only job was taking care of my kids. That was my primary job, and what I had to figure out is how do I do that and still make a living to support my kids. And right after, I had a few discussions with Jesus. He was very helpful in pointing me in, and I knew what the direction was. I just wasn't sure how to get there. And I have to admit that Jesus was very helpful in pointing me in the right direction. Um, and I had a dream, and my image of Jesus appeared in the dream, and he said something like, "You asked for my advice," and basically I said, "Jesus, what am I going to do with these four kids without their mother?" And he said, "What you should be asking is, what are these four kids going to do without their mother?" And that was my fear. And how do I leave a job that is a tremendous way of making a living so I'm able to provide well for my kids, um, and then still have time to raise my kids the way I want to? And that was the problem. And by pointing me in that direction, which is what I knew all along, is that was my main job, taking care of my kids. Um, I had to then figure out a way of doing that. This business came up for sale. The owner was in terminal cancer, um, and he'd sold a lot of the business off to provide for his own family.
This was the coin and stamp
It
shop
was a
in
coin and stamp
Manchester.
shop, yeah, by the same name. And so I negotiated a price with him, and I had a partner at that time, and we both put a lot of money in. And if I often said if I had to start the same business today, I probably wouldn't do it, because starting a business like that is really tough. The best part about it, and I don't even remember a lot of the early parts of the business, it was coins and stamps and jewelry and gold and silver. Um, but it was in the early 90s. There wasn't much interest in gold and silver, except for people who were bringing in jewelry to scrap. Um, but it was, the rare coin business and rare stamp business was at least thriving. And so I bought my partner out, and at the beginning of 1992, and I just, I knew what all the expenses were, so I was doing daily accounting and determining what I had to do to bring enough money in to pay the bills. So I used to go to coin shows. I sold metal detectors, and I had a metal detector anyway, so I knew all about them, and that boomed. So between 1992 and 1995, it was touch and go. But in 95, we actually sold 550 metal detectors. Okay.
Wow.
But knowing something about them and knowing how to explain them to people, and we advertised on television. So that boomed. Um, Gold and silver grew gradually, starting with the Gulf War. That was in um, 91.
Yep.
And, so gold took a jump, not a big jump, but, it went from, 3 to, 7 or 8. No, it wasn't that bad. It didn't much get above. Well, it was I remember one big customer at 253.50 gold. And he said, "This is the time to strike." He was telling this one guy he invested a ton of money at that price. So he was getting gold coins for less than $300 an ounce. And, I met people like that were deep thinkers, um, but they had one thing in common. They were providing for their families.
When did you see silver stacking, gold stacking really start to take off?
Um, hmm. Well, I was stacking back in the early 80s. All through that time, I was buying bags of silver coins. I remember as a boy when we went to a beach club in the summertime, and my mother, because I was a coin collector, gave me a walking Liberty $half every day. Okay. And I would buy a hamburger and a Coke and an ice cream. And I just had to make sure I had 10 cents left over to call home in case there was a thunderstorm. Okay.
That's great.
For 50 cents.
Wow.
But that's the way my life was growing up. I was always a coin collector. And, for what little money I had, I guess you could call me a stacker
Yep.
at the age of 5 to 6 or 7.
Your business though has gone through a lot of changes, right?
It's the biggest change is stamp collecting. And, you know, there are two things about stamp collecting. Stamps are all history. It doesn't matter if they're U.S. stamps or foreign stamps, all about history. The stamps are made to tell the story of a country's history, also tell a story about the people who are famous to that country. And I mean, that's certainly true in our case. Um, but it's all over the world. That's why stamps came into effect. The first stamp was the first person who devised the postal system. That was uh, Franklin, Benjamin Franklin. He was the founder of the postal system. And the second one was Washington. So the 5-cent stamp was Franklin. Since Washington was twice as important, he got the 10-cent stamp. Stamps have always been tied to history, and history just became less important to people. History is what's most important to the survival of a country. Mm. And I don't see anybody protecting history. I don't see them even teaching history in schools anymore, especially American history.
Coin collecting. Do you think that's also a hobby that is
Well, it's declined some, but the thing about coins is different from stamps is all the coins have some intrinsic value, at least in your own country they do. There's still kids who collect Indian head cents and buffalo nickels and, mercury dimes, things like that, because they're still more or less affordable. The silver coins are getting less affordable for kids. But, if a father is collecting with a son, and I collected with my father, everything he had in his collection, he got out of change, including his 20-cent piece collection, which is just, I wish I still had that collection. But
talk about that, yeah.
And people don't know we had 20-cent pieces. People know we had 3-cent pieces. We had a 3-cent silver piece, which is really tiny. We had a 3-cent nickel. The first nickel was a 3-cent. So if you said, "So what do you got for change?" "Oh, I got a dime and a nickel." It was a 3-cent piece. I had a paper route, and it was 35 customers right around where I lived, and I had 2 bankers in the route, and they had to pay $1.05 per week for the paper. So they would give me a silver dollar and an interesting nickel. It could have been a Shield nickel or a Liberty nickel every week. And so I take these home to my father, and I said, "I've got to give this to the paper company. What do we do?" And my father said, "Well, let's work out a work schedule." I did more work so I could keep those silver dollars.
Nice.
So he would buy them from the paper company, and then if I give me money so I could reimburse the paper company, we had to put it in an envelope and post it at the local candy store, and that's how I started my collection. And I had lots and lots of silver dollars and all this stuff, but that was everybody collected coins because there were interesting things in the coins all the time.
And it was also about history too.
It was also about history. I mean, the 1916 series is worth looking at because all these different portrayals of liberty are important to this country, important to the history.
Your primary business has shifted to more of the silver and gold bullion for your customers. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And your business is booming, isn't it?
It is.
Why do you think that we have seen such a tremendous increase in stacking silver and gold bullion?
I think it's fear of the future. Fear of the future is everywhere. I think one of our more famous videos is when you asked me, "Well, now that looks like Biden's going to be president, what do you suggest people do?" And I said, "Sell everything you don't need."
That was a popular video.
Yeah, but I don't think they understood the preface. If you don't know what's going to happen in the government, and you're a little concerned about what the socialists in the government have in store for you, start with easy stuff. Get rid of stuff you don't need. And I said, if you have anything left over after you've paid your debt down, that's the important thing. Get rid of the debt, and if there's whatever's left over, put half in the cash and half in the precious metals, because the precious metals are a good, safe place to put money. And people will say, "Well, yeah, but it went all the way up to $2,000 an ounce, and now it's only 17." Yeah, it does that.
It does that.
You put it away. It doesn't really matter what it is.
Right.
If you're not planning to spend it.
Good point.
But they're both liquid. That's what's important. if you have a chunk of money you want to put in a safe place, that's where you put it in gold. It's something that you don't think you'll ever have to spend. You want to have it in case you have an emergency. Um, and, if you don't need it down the road, you can at least leave it for your children. Um, but, the place to put something in a safe place, money in a safe place is gold. And silver is more a barter currency. It is more every day becoming a barter currency. Um, I know there are farm stands up north that where the owner will take. I don't know if they'll take it all in silver, but they'll take silver for ears of corn or vegetables or whatever they're selling. Um, and certainly a lot of people will take gun dealers will sell you ammo for silver. Um, Most of the ones I've talked to will. And if you want to buy somebody's gun, we have a lot of people who would sell you a gun for silver, or gold. But I think that you need to look at some sort of currency that you can make liquid if you need to, and
What
that's where silver is. Silver is very liquid.
What about those who are trying to figure out if they should save for a larger size denomination of gold? What's your opinion on
I
that?
think saving for a larger denomination makes sense. I bought a dozen quarter-ounce Eagles last night. I bought 8 more 1-ounce gold Buffaloes last night. I bought another 10th-ounce gold coins last night. And I still think the premiums on the fractionals are too high. Um, I know why they're high. The U.S. Mint is doing the best it can to meet demand. Obviously, the item that costs the least amount of money is going to be the one that they're going to see the greatest demand in. So they make lots of 10th ounce. They make lots of quarter ounce. I'm not sure they can ever keep up with demand for the fractionals. The fractionals can be purchased in other ways. The bars are a good way because they don't have that mystique or aura of the United States Mint. They may come from a Swiss mint. May come from a Germany or France or whatever, or the Perth Mint in Australia or Canadian Mint. But you can buy fractionals a lot less if you want a smaller piece of gold to barter with. Don't overlook the bars. People ask me, should I get the sovereign coins or should I get bars and rounds? For barter, it really doesn't matter. If for liquidity, it may matter. Okay, whether you get a sovereign coin or a bar. And not many people are going to argue about a silver American Eagle, where they may say, well, I don't know anything about these Krugerrands. How do you know they're real?